Hey everyone, Kyle here. If you haven't heard about Anchor by Spotify, it's the easiest way to make a podcast with everything you need all in one place. Let me explain a little bit. Anchor has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. When hosting on Anchor, you can distribute your podcast on listening platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcast, and so much more. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place. And best of all, Anchor is totally free. So download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. That's ANCHOR.fm. They'll have everything you need all in one place. I can speak from my experience. It's been awesome so far and super easy. So go check it out, guys, and we'll see you later. All right. Hi, everyone. This is Our Travel Experiences. I'm Kyle Rasmussen, and today I have with me my good friend Amanda. Amanda, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you, Kyle?
Doing well. Excited to hear about some of your travel experiences today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, for sure. So before we hopped on, you were talking to me about the different types of travel that you've done over the years, and you were talking about adventure travel. And you said that you went to Mexico for a fun adventure trip.
Yeah, and just to kind of recap, I guess, for the listeners, I feel like I divide travel up into three different categories where I've traveled, to see family and friends, and I've traveled for work, and then I've traveled for what I consider adventure. I like rock climbing and mountaineering and running on trails and finding adventures that kind of take me to unique places. And so it's funny, I had someone who asked me the other day to create a map of all the places that I would want to go see. And I was like, I clicked on all the tops of these mountains that I wanted to go to. And I was like, don't most people put restaurants or really touristy locations? So I'm a little weird that way. But yeah, one of my favorite trips that I was mentioning to you was we flew into Monterrey, Mexico. And just about an hour out of there, there's a canyon, Potrero Chico. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly, but it's this rock climbing mecca, and it's this canyon that just goes on forever. And so you pull into this little tiny town, and it kind of looks like nothing. And it's this little farm village, and you kind of go outside of it down this broken up road. And you pull into this campsite for climbers, and you can rent either two little houses, or you can be in this community dormitory area with community cooking space and stuff, or you can just rent a tent spot there for the night. Wow. And so people come and bum it in December, when they're on break from college or whatever. Dang. And it turns into this party hostel. And then everybody just throws on their climbing backpack, and you walk down the road, I don't know, a half a mile, and then you get to this kind of deserted looking it almost looks like a children's playground, and you walk in through this arch, and then all of a sudden this canyon just opens up around the corner, and you're like, oh, wow. This is what heaven looks like. It is so crazy. And the rocks just shoot up forever, and it's 20 pitches up that you can climb. And you could spend all day working on stuff in there, and there's some really iconic climbs, and it just goes back into all these really crazy crevices, and then down this canyon road into these cool little jungle houses that start popping out of the trees. And so it was just a super cool place to hike around.
So did you do a different section of it each day you were there, or how did that work?
Oh my gosh, I wish I could just be yes. There's so much, I couldn't have even climbed it in the week, 10 days that we were there. But yeah, we did try to hit different sections, and we have this massive guidebook that's an inch and a half thick of all the climbs in there. And we just picked ones that we wanted to hit with our friends or whatever, or areas that we just wanted to check out and see what they looked like.
Yeah. So, okay, I know nothing about rock climbing. What kind of gear did you have to bring, and how high was the canyon? Just tell me more about that.
Yeah, so generally you're climbing with your climbing shoes, and then this is pitch climbing versus bouldering. So you do need a harness and a chalk bag. And we were doing sport climbing at that location. So you use these carabiners with a dog bone in between them, where you're climbing and pulling them off your harness to clip into a bolt that's already on the wall, with one end of that dog bones carabiner essentially, and then the other end will clip into your rope and help guide you up. Okay. So generally it's partner climbing. So you're going to be climbing up one pitch with one person leading, and then when they get to the top, they can either come back down and then put the other person on, and then they go up and climb the same route and pull everything off of it. Or in this case, that's more called cragging. But you had the opportunity here to keep climbing and do pitch climbing. And so we were going up these multi-pitches that were anywhere between 2 and like 24 pitches, depending on what somebody wanted to do. So a 60-meter rope folded in half is what those would be. So it's like 30 meters per pitch, approximately.
Okay. Oh, geez. Okay, so 30 times 24, that's a lot.
Yeah, so that's, some of the taller ones. But even a pitch that was like 10 or 12 pitches, times a 30-meter, rope extension, essentially, would still take you a fair chunk of the day.
Yeah, okay. Dang, that's a lot more than I was thinking in my head.
Yeah, you should definitely look at pictures because it's like way more than you would expect to just like pop out of this like Mexican jungle, and even like multi-pitch climbing in our area, you kind of have to travel for a couple of pitches like that. You go to Yosemite or even like Western Washington has some of that type of climbing, but more so in like Eastern Washington, you're like maybe 2 pitches kind of thing. And so, of course, unless you're going to climb into the mountains and do trad climbing, which is another animal. But, that type of sport climbing, really the only thing similar to that in the like Mecca sense would be Smith Rock, which is mostly single pitch climbing. That is all, it's technically the birthplace of sport climbing. So that's in Bend, Oregon. And
really?
So those are kind of 2 of the like sort of Mecca areas that I would say are pretty iconic.
Huh. I never even knew that about Bend.
Yeah. There is actually quite the controversy about it, if you really want to get into it, because of the fact that it's the birthplace of sport climbing. And people think that you shouldn't have bolted routes. And so there's people that go in there and like clip bolts that have been put up to protect other climbers because they think you should have to like put your own gear up if you want to climb, and they want to make it less accessible to people. That's a whole like political realm that you can get into with climbing.
Well, I feel like that's probably the case with a lot of adventure type of travel like that. I mean, I know like hiking up into the mountains and stuff like that, sometimes you'll see I like my family, for example, we always try to go where no one else goes, and we try to keep some of those spots secret that we go to because we don't want other people traveling on those as well. So I could see that.
Well, I think it's really difficult with like the world of Instagram that we live in.
Yeah.
Because so many people geotag places and then they trash them.
Yeah.
And it's so sad because I don't know if you can stop me if you don't want me to get into this, but I think like leave no trace is really important. We don't do enough education with that geotagging process of like what it means to leave no trace and to respect areas and to preserve those places if we want to continue to go back to them.
Yeah,
so there's a lot of places that are making it harder with permits and stuff to get into those places now. So I mean, I would say that the travel experiences that I've had, I would really consider very sacred because I wonder, like, if I'll ever get to do some of them again, depending on what people decide to do in those places between now and when I go back.
Yeah, definitely. I think with that too, people don't realize. Yeah, okay, maybe you walked across this and it didn't make that big of a difference right now, but multiply that by all the people, all of the weather that happens in that place too. Like that adds up to that landscape probably not being there in the future.
Yeah.
And for me, like I'm a big proponent of natural landscapes and beauty. Like being able to leave that for other people to see is definitely really important. And I don't know, I just appreciate seeing all the natural beauty the way it is.
Yeah.
That's some of my favorite travel experiences is going to those remote locations that are just naturally amazing.
Well, I'll be really honest. You can probably say the same thing, but like travel changes us.
Oh, yeah.
It changes how we see the world. It changes how we see ourselves. It changes how we see other people. It changes how we see our communities. And
100%.
I think I want to leave that to the next generation. And so, like, when I think about how much travel has changed me, changed my life, changed my business even, changed my friendships, changed my family, why would I want to steal that from someone else? And I think when we go to locations and don't think about the repercussions past like where our steps are even walking or what our trash is doing, that's something that we're not necessarily connecting and saying like, what are we leaving? What are we preserving? What experience are we creating? What energy are we giving to this space? What energy and experience are we giving to the people even camping next to us? And how are they going to remember that? And I think that's really important to take into those places too. And I think the world totally feeds off of energy. And when we don't take that into those spaces and we don't think about, what that is going to be, 100 years from now, it doesn't leave the same experience on us. And so I think like changing ourselves and our mindset as we travel, like automatically leaves like kind of these different micro effects on the spaces around us too.
Yeah, for sure. That can go into a whole deeper political discussion, but that's one of my big pet peeves with a lot of, I would say like novice travelers, not just to like, go do adventure things, but traveling to different cities or different countries is they go in with the kind of closed mindset of like, I'm here and like, this is my space now sort of thing. I'm a big proponent of just go in there with an open mind and just appreciate the place for what it is, the culture for what it is. Don't try to go in and enforce your views and your, ideas onto that place.
Yeah.
That's kind of taken away from why you're traveling, in my opinion.
Well, it's really interesting. I'm going to totally hit on a pet peeve of mine. But dating in the world of travelers is really interesting to me because I'm not married. And like when I have like looked through dating profiles or gone on dates with people, it's like there are people who travel, I'm like giving my little air quotes here. And it's like, these are all the resorts I've been to or whatever. And I'm like, okay. You just basically left your imprint on a place and gave them your money. Like, that's great that you're supporting their economy.
Yeah.
But, like, stepping outside of that resort is a totally different experience. And so it's like, if you are not, in some ways, like, strapping on a backpack and walking around the streets and figuring out which neighborhoods scare you, you haven't done it right.
Exactly.
And so, like, maybe that's an extreme, but I do think, just like there's different levels of hikers and there's different levels of musicians and different levels of travelers, like, that's okay. But you do have to come into that with that perspective of like, what do I want to not even take away from this place, but just like, what like experience do I want to have with a city? And like, how do you create that experience and like step into the energy and like learn the locals and like find something that will impact you again instead of just being like, I've been here, check the box.
Yeah.
And so I've almost gone away from like posting on Instagram sometimes and like sharing experiences with people, because like I really want to keep those like sacred to myself, and I want to like have an experience that is like really down to earth with like the people and the place and the food and just like everything that I can when I'm there. And I don't think like that it clicks for everybody. And so like I would say for anybody listening, like if you want to be a better traveler, like step into that space and like learn how to connect with other people on a different level in exactly the way that you just said of like, how can you not just like, be there and like, bring yourself into a space, but like, how can you like learn from it? Yeah, for sure. Well, and I know like going to some other places around the world and seeing how they live and interact with each other, it affects me. And then I come back to my home and I kind of implement some of that culture in my own life, and I feel like I'm a much better person for it. I feel like I learned a bunch of ideas that could make life better back home too. Well, and I really find that happens even with adventure travel when I'm like, and maybe this sounds silly, but like learning from the trees and the mountains because they're not like talking back to me like a human, but I think those spaces and like what we think about and like how we walk and move and wake up and realize about ourselves and what it's like to be with ourselves in those quiet spaces like teaches us another level of ourselves that we never get the opportunity to live when we're just trying to keep up with the crowd. Yeah, we could sure use more of that. So it's like we can listen for it anywhere. Yeah, that's what I like about, adventure traveling, but just going out into the wilderness. I mean, you don't have the cell phone, you don't have anything going on. It's just you and in nature, which, I mean, we came from nature. And so, I don't know, you get more in tune with the earth
so to speak.
Yeah.
It's really fun. So, what other adventure trips have you done?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, so another one of my favorites. I have lots of people who laugh at me for this one. But it will, like I said, be my favorite one ever because I was new-ish to rock climbing at the time and new-ish to like sort of what I would consider the bum life of like adventuring. And I was really just in a spot in my life where I was trying to learn a lot about myself and had recently joined a climbing gym and joined this like climbing page on Facebook. And so anyway, one of the people in the group posted like, hey, I'm looking for a partner for a Utah trip. And I had figured out by this point that I already loved trad climbing, which is where you like climb a crack and you're placing your own protection with a cam system that kind of like fills the crack and then you like clip into that cam system.
Sounds terrifying.
And so it is not everyone's cup of tea. It's generally meant for alpine climbing. It is definitely more challenging because there's a lot more gear to mess with kind of in the process. And if you're climbing something more difficult, you know, there's a higher risk and chance of falling, essentially. And so anyway, I was like really intrigued by this type of climbing. It's still my favorite type of climbing. Anyway, someone posted, they were like, partner bailed, need a partner. And they were like, these are the dates. And I was like, oh, I'm available. Like, I could do this. And so I like messaged one of my friends. I was like, hey, do you know this guy? Because I don't know them. They're like, yeah, like he's safe. And I was like, this person's not going to like kill me in the back of their car or something like that. So I like messaged them and I was like, hey, I'm available, but I can't drive down the same day as you, but I can come down the day after basically. And I would be available for the return trip. I was like, what if I bought a one-way ticket and like met you there? So I bought a one-way ticket to Utah and like met up with this guy that I had didn't know. And I just like jumped in his car and lived on the back of his car with him for a couple of days.
Oh my gosh.
And then we just like climbed all over Indian Creek. And we were there for Creeksgiving, which is when like all these other people come and we have Thanksgiving at the climbing crag basically. And so like I Thanksgiving in Utah with this like random dude and we're really good friends still. And anyway, we then drove back and it was like kind of this like ridiculous show of, you know, driving straight through the night. And like, I had to like fly out of the Tri-Cities airport to this like little tiny random airport in Utah to like make sure that I connected with him in time. It was, it was quite the ordeal. But it was so much fun. And I climbed one of my hardest routes that I'd ever climbed during that trip. Met incredible people that I'm still in touch with around the country. Got some of my favorite photos of myself because I was just like the happiest I had ever been. Got to see incredible things that I still have not gone back to see, but also step into a space that is struggling with preservation and got to like see what they're really struggling with firsthand. Beautiful sunsets and sunrises and really great time with a new friend as well. So yeah, that was probably my other favorite one.
That's awesome. That's I don't know if I would have been that brave, but you know, that's one of the beauties of travel is you never know who you're going to meet, how you're going to cross paths, that sort of thing. So that's really fun to hear you tell that story.
It's so great because like looking back on it, you're like, what was I thinking? And then it's like all these amazing relationships came out of it. So I think when you take a risk, like people are there to meet you in that process. Like risks are just scary when we make them scary in our heads. So that's one of the other things I love about travel is it just says like everything can be a risk and everything can be a reward. As long as you're being safe. Don't die.
Don't be dumb. But
right.
Well, I'm sure especially with adventure travel, I mean, there's a lot more risk probably. And I'm sure it's a close community when you go do that with some people.
Yeah, for sure. And especially the rock climbing community, like you get to that place where you're like in the parking lot all like making your oatmeal and like boiling water behind your car and then like everyone's petting each other's dogs and like being like, I forgot a spoon, does anyone have a cup? And you know, it's like totally a bum life thing, but it's so fun because it's just this pure like childlike fun. And nobody cares like what your career is. Nobody cares if you've showered in 3 days. Nobody cares if you've shaved your legs or like how healthy you're being or anything.
Yeah.
Because you're all there like smiling and like conquering goals and putting together puzzles. And so it's like if you have the wrong puzzle piece, like nobody cares. They're like happy to step in with the other one or like give you a hand or you know, whatever it is, share a snack. And it's like there's nothing more pure in my mind than those kinds of spaces, especially as an adult.
I love that. That's one of my favorite parts about traveling is just the community that comes along with some of those things. When you share such an amazing experience like that together, like that's a bond that you have forever.
Yeah.
I know some of my best friends are people that I've traveled the world with.
That's so awesome.
So that's cool to hear. What other adventure travels you want to share?
Oh my gosh. I think another one is actually in my backyard. Not like my literal backyard.
I was going to say, that's a long trip.
Although I have done some adventures there too. Definitely like camped in my own backyard and stuff. I mean, I guess on that note, like adventure is where you find it and where you make it. And I know people that during COVID like put up tents in their living rooms or in their backyards and just like made the best of their situation.
Yeah.
And I really believe in that kind of adventure where it's like I've definitely like pulled out after coming back from an adventure, like pulled out my sleeping bag and just been like, I'm going to sleep outside tonight, you know, or like I'm going to sleep on the floor, or I just missed my car and I'll just like lay down the seats and sleep in the back of my car. But no, I went in Washington over like Snoqualmie Pass area and was with a friend, and we decided that I was like, I really want to learn how to build snow caves. And this person had experience with it, and they were like, cool, I know the spot. And I was like, okay, cool. So we go over there, and they're like, we're going to stay the first night in this friend's cabin, and then we'll go off from there, you know, so we're in the area, and we can start fresh, blah, blah, blah. Okay? So we get there, sleep in the cabin, pack up the bags, and they were like, yeah, the trailhead's actually just around the corner. I'm like, okay, cool. Everything's covered in snow. I don't know what I'm doing. You know, I'm just like following the leader at this point. And so we like walk down this road to this trailhead, and we start walking, and we're in snowshoes because everything is covered in snow. We have our backpacks on like at summer camping, and we walk, I don't even know how far we went, but we just basically walked like half the day. We started up pretty early, got to some place by, I don't know, it was like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. On the way, we picked a mountain that we were going to hike up, and this is where we were going to build the snow cave. And I almost died. So we start like zigzagging our way up, and it's a pretty steep slope. We need to come up this side to basically not create an avalanche. And so we end up like creating this like really tight kind of zigzag pattern to make sure that we could like kind of stomp the snow into these little like stair steps essentially. So we're kind of coming back and forth and going up it. We go between these two trees, and then all of a sudden the snow just like falls out between my leg. No. And I just like had this panic attack where I was like, I'm gonna die. Like I just saw my life flash before my eyes. And like fortunately I was able to like backstep a little bit back onto whatever was solid and kind of grab for the tree next to me, and I had to back my way out of it and like create a new stair step. But this tree well like totally fell out underneath me, which is like, it kills people all the time. And so it's like if I had put my weight forward, like, I mean, a quarter of a second more, you know, and not been able to like tip it back, I would have been in a tree well and like, who knows, injured, dead, like I have no idea. Like I couldn't see the bottom of it, so I have no idea how bad it would have been. But that also, like, because of where it was stacked, could have like basically slid me all the way down the mountain, created an avalanche, and even if it wasn't the tree well, it could have been other things that killed me. So then I'm like creating this new path, and then like the mountain starts to slide away underneath me again. And so like I got to a spot where I could like grab this tree in my friend's hand, and they like pull me up over the side of the mountain. And I'm sure it was like, I'm maybe exaggerating it in my head a little bit because it, you know, I'm not like dangling off a cliff, but I mean, like I was losing my footing. I like had to have them pull me over, and it's still one of those moments where you're like, I still am not clear. Like this is crazy. So anyway, we get to the top of this mountain, finally take a breather, like have a snack, whatever, build a fire, blah, blah, blah. And then we like come down the other side of it and start digging in. And so like with a snow cave, you have to like measure how much snow is on top and on the sides. And so we like spend like an hour digging out the snow cave, and we made a really cool snow cave. It had like a living room to it, it had stairs, and this like raised bed area.
Do you have a picture of it?
I do, yeah.
Okay.
I'll show you. Yeah. And so we get in there and like build this like loft for the beds and stuff. It was pretty cool. And spend the night in there. And that was really cool because, I mean, you're like watching this sunset from what feels like this very remote place.
Yeah.
Well, in the morning, we just basically like find this safe path and we like slide down it on our snowshoes as if we're skiing and then hike back up. And we get to the spot and we like cross over this river. And I'm like, oh, this is really like interesting. Like, this is beautiful and stuff. And he's like, look up. And I was like, what? It was like the cabin's right there. Like we were just basically in the backyard of the cabin the entire time.
Oh, wow.
And it was so crazy to be like, we like hardly went anywhere. Again, adventure in our own backyard. Like we were probably like on the other side of the ski hill, basically. Yeah. And we never saw another human. We like still had multiple life-threatening opportunities. The snow was still beautiful. We ran into all these waterfalls, saw all this nature and everything, and like we're basically just below the cabin. And so I love that adventure can be just like that too.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was just, I mean, incredible waterfalls. But like I haven't even seen when I've like spent time hiking into places, and they're just like right there.
Yeah.
So
there's so many beautiful waterfalls in this area.
We are very blessed. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, but that's another one.
Yeah. Okay, my heart was pounding while you were telling me that.
I'm alive. I'm here.
Like, oh. It just freaks me out even imagining that.
I should have shared in Mexico, we had another like kind of life-threatening event. In that first story I told you, we got up a couple pitches and ran into a rattlesnake and had to back down really quickly. And another time we like walked around this corner through this like basically web of poisonous spiders. So like there's, I mean, I could go on and on about life-threatening opportunities on adventures. But yeah, you gotta be always kind of looking for what else is happening out there, having its own little adventure, the rattlesnakes and spiders and everything.
Yeah. So that kind of leads me to my next question is, for someone who wants to go do some sort of adventure travel like that, what kind of advice do you have for them?
Join a community. Okay. I'm a big community person in general, but like if you want to volunteer, you join a community and like you could volunteer on your own and like, you know, create something. But I think even with nonprofits, like when you join forces, like your impact makes a bigger difference when there's other people involved.
Yeah.
And like shared experiences build a better community. And we live in such a beautiful time where like the rock climbing, the backpacking, the mountaineering, the whitewater kayaking, the whatever you want to, you know, look into has a community available. There's Instagram pages, Facebook pages, there's gyms, there's clubs, there's training environments and all sorts of places that you can learn. And generally speaking, those people have had incredible experiences outside that have changed them, and they want to share it, and they are looking to mentor people. And so if you are kind and polite to their spaces and to them, and you are truly coachable, they will give back to you and feed into you. And so like go with a professional, and it doesn't mean you have to hire a guide, but like do your own research, be curious, be coachable, put in the work, you know, get the gear yourself, don't rely on other people, and like really go into it asking questions that really encourage communication, in the sense of like a question's only dumb if you're being arrogant about it. No question is dumb if you're truly asking and you're wanting to foster a better community through it. And so like even now, years later, I still check with my friends, like, what is the gear list? What are you bringing? What are you expecting? And even if I'm 10 steps ahead of them on gear, I still want to communicate about that so that we're really on the same page with whatever we're doing and not causing a situation where someone's going to die.
Well, that's probably smart, too, with joining a community is, I mean, if you went and tried to do rock climbing by yourself in that remote place, those life-threatening things might go the other way.
Yes, for sure.
Any like essential things for people to bring or have or know when it comes to adventure travel like that?
I mean, I think it's really just a coachable spirit in the sense of like, I had people for so many years that stepped up with gear that I didn't have or couldn't afford or didn't understand, didn't even, know that I should have on my gear list.
Yeah.
And having a community that cared, that would say things or lend me things or whatever, was really the biggest asset. And so I think I've always been an avid learner and like curious person in general. And I think generally I truly believe that like everybody knows more than I do because they all have something to offer. Like we all have something to share. And
it's a good mentality. I like that.
I feel like it served me pretty well. And so it's like, just teach me. Like teach me what you're passionate about.
Yeah.
And I think when we see the world like that, there's, just an opportunity to learn from everybody. And you can't have it all perfect when you're out there. But when you're willing to ask for help, even if you are traveling alone, there are people who are kind, who want to connect with you and will climb with you at a random crag in, Red Rocks or Utah or whatever, if that communication and that vulnerability and humility is there.
Yeah. Well, that's good advice. I like that. So you also told me that you travel a lot for work. Tell me about some of those stories.
Yeah. Less now with the pandemic.
Yeah.
More local stuff. But I worked a lot in Guatemala and Peru for a while. I worked all over like the East Coast and I travel, to cities around here and stuff too. But I would say like the main area that I traveled to was Guatemala. I was the development director for an organization in Antigua, Guatemala for a little while and did some consulting with them as well. And so Guatemala is like a second home to me.
Yeah.
I've been going back there off and on since I was a kid, actually. So I started going there. It was like 2015, I think, was the first time that I was there. No, wait. Sorry. 2015. That's 10 years off.
Yeah.
2005.
Okay.
Your face was like, that doesn't make any sense.
I mean, the math didn't quite work there, but...
Right? I'm really young. 2005. I had to think about what year I graduated. 2005, I think, was my first year there. And then I've been going periodically since then.
Yeah. That's cool. Antigua is one of the most beautiful places I've ever been to.
I was going to say, you've been there, haven't you? Once or more than once?
Just once.
Okay.
Would love to go back, but actually one of my favorite souvenirs that I've gotten is a painting of Antigua that I bought from a local artist just off the street there.
Was it the volcanoes?
Yeah, there was one volcano, and then it had the cobblestone street with the the colorful houses and stuff.
I have a very similar painting in my home.
It's beautiful.
It is one of my favorites.
That whole area is just a painting in itself.
It really is. Yeah.
So what do you think of Antigua? What was it like working down there as well as being there?
Yeah. So the first time that I went down there, and the first couple of times, was all nonprofit trips. And so I was down there with a church, and we basically put on like schools or like health clinics or whatever was kind of needed, some vacation Bible school type stuff. We would go into homes and help set up like stoves for families that were cooking on open fires in their living rooms, essentially. We would go down there and deliver food bags. So the school had a sponsorship program. The school that I was partnering with had a sponsorship program, and the kids could essentially, and the parents could volunteer to get these stoves or food bags or whatever. And so we would go and do these tours and talk to the families about what they needed and how their kids are doing in school and what their grades were, and deliver food for the week. When I worked down there, I worked with some of the similar programs, and we worked a little bit more in marketing. I did most of it remotely, but the executive director of the program that I worked with down there has been a good friend of mine since I was really little, and so that was kind of how that all came together. And so being able to sit down there and see them develop a board for their nonprofit, partner with other nonprofits, look at how to not just fund a nonprofit through American dollars, but fund it through local money, and basically create work programs for the locals in a local mentality, if that makes sense, in the sense of like, we don't just want to come in and inject money into a community. We want to teach people to like, you know, don't just give a man a fish, but like teach him to fish. And then he'll feed his family forever. And so it's like, how can we really create that environment? And so that was really special to be a part of. From when I started going down there in 2005 until now, I did get to see a couple kids graduate from the school.
Oh, cool.
They went on to college. One of the kids got his PhD and came back to work for the school. And then to see him like have his own family and give back to these kids and share his story and have his siblings come work for the school, like that's what sustainable programs look like. And I think so many times we think about nonprofits that like move our hearts in the United States, and they're coming in for like disaster relief or something, or a place that we as Americans can feel just good about ourselves. And there's actually several books written on like the white savior complex, how we like to feel good about saving, you know, another culture.
Yeah, a lot of that's about feeling good instead of actually doing good, unfortunately.
And you know what? That money is helpful. It has changed lives. It does make a difference. But most of the time, if you go to, you know, Mexico or whatever and build a house, those people weren't involved in the process. They don't know how to maintain it. Those houses don't stand. Those people don't go back to work necessarily. You know, it's not a proponent for making that family's life better. It just really means they have a roof over their head now. And I think when we try to do that, there's just sort of a sad like end to that like potentially cyclical process of sustainability that we could be feeding into. And so I really love even like the stove project, where I got to be involved in that and see those people have to like give something and essentially earn or buy these stoves with hours before they could even get them. And they had to be in part of the like they had to be part of the installation process and things like that. And they had to come to a class to learn how to use them. And it wasn't big things. It was like just stuff that made them feel ownership in the process. And I think that's really important in the projects that I've been a part of, in all of the work that I've done overseas and traveling in general, where it's like, how can I create more sustainable patterns for the people that I'm impacting so that when I'm here, this trip wasn't for me to feel good. Like, I got to travel, but it's like, what is my work actually doing? Am I coming here to like sign paperwork and shake hands and kiss babies? Or am I coming here to like make a difference so that people are like, that person changed my life and this is how specifically. And so I think I think about my work like that a lot in general, but specifically overseas.
Well, what was the name of the nonprofit?
It's Graces. So Graces is the 501c3 in the United States. They're based out of North Carolina, and they, of course, are accepting donations. This is not an advertisement, but they have a great program. The school in Guatemala is called Escuela Integrada, and they are a separate not-for-profit over there that Graces essentially like donates money to work through the tax implications of essentially money going overseas. Yeah, okay, cool. What advice would you have for someone who's looking to get involved in that sort of thing? Yeah, I mean, check out their website. They actually run not only the ability to sponsor children, so, there's like programs like Compassion International and stuff out there, which do a great job. But one thing that I love about Grace's program is that like it's only one sponsor per kid. And a lot of people don't know that when they sponsor kids through other programs, there's multiple sponsors per child. And that's how they keep it really low in price. Graces has one sponsor and one kid. So you can actually send presents to your kid, and you get to chat with your kid over video chat and really receive letters from them and hear about their grades. And like, you're adopting this kid basically. And so their family and them like actually consider you as a sponsor godparents. And so like, I have a kid that I've been sponsoring for years and like have watched them progress through all these grades and like send them letters to be like, make sure you're doing good in school this year. Like, I want to keep sponsoring you. And like, did you enjoy your Christmas present? You know, and those kinds of things. And like, I've been to her home and I've like hugged her whole family, and just these really precious moments that I don't think you get that kind of like level of just involvement when you're working in other programs. So I really love their sponsorship program. They have like events that they run sort of where you can sponsor food bags or like different events that they have going on through the year. They've got like different events that you can even attend. If you don't want to just sponsor it, you can go down, and there's like an annual like supporters gathering where you can like sit in on some of the board meetings and go to like sort of like fancy ball like fundraiser thing down there. They do what they consider vision trips as well. And so that's a great way too if you're like, I don't know if I want to get involved. I want to go on a vacation, but like I also like want to see what they're doing, but like, you know, I'm just like kind of testing the waters out.
Yeah.
They basically will plan a vacation for you, and they use their students to plan it. And so like you pay a little nominal fee essentially for their travel guide services.
Oh, cool.
But it supports the school. It supports the students and parents having jobs where they facilitate and drive you around and all that stuff. You essentially have no work to do. And then they even set up your hotel, your food, your like, I mean, everything where you're going. And so then they also plan in there an opportunity for you to visit the school, see some of the kids' homes, but just like very like kind of nice touch points to just see what they're doing. And so it's a great opportunity to see the place from like the fun vacation side of things and also from the real like walk the streets of Guatemala with like real Guatemalans kind of things. But yeah, that's all on their website. I don't mind if people reach out to me too. I'm happy to connect them directly through email as well.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that seems like a very unique setup for that nonprofit.
Yeah.
I have not heard of any other nonprofits doing that sort of thing.
Yeah. They just really care about the experience because it's not about getting really big. It's about being really sustainable so that we as Americans could walk away at one point if we wanted.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, again, with some of the nonprofits out there, yeah, it's great. The money helps and everything, but then, you know, those other people might become reliant on just the nonprofit, and they know that people are going to donate to that. And so they don't actually get any skills or any, you know, real experience out of it.
Yeah.
So that's cool. I like that it's a lot more hands-on and like kind of integrated. It's not just here's, you know, X amount of dollars. Good luck.
Yeah. Well, and I think I as a financial advisor think about that kind of stuff a lot, where there's like opportunities for qualified charitable distributions for people in retirement, and it's like finding a nonprofit of some kind that aligns with your values to be able to like leave a legacy in retirement as you're like looking to avoid tax consequences and stuff too is really fun. And I think, you know, to be able to find
all the listeners,
right? I won't go into that part, but yeah. But I think like being able to find something that aligns with you, like whether it's your church or a nonprofit overseas or something that you've like really, you know, put money into for a long time or time and energy. You know, I think like the goal is to get creative, and so like to find someone who can support you in that process, whether it's a friend or mentor or financial advisor or whatever. Like I highly encourage that for people who maybe even can't travel, and like finding other ways to like sort of let your family or your money travel too. Like travel can be really creative when you start to think about like what is travel? Well, travel's an experience, and it's like an out-of-country experience. Do we have to travel out of country to do that? And like, how are the ways that we can like give to those communities that, you know, back to that white savior complex, if maybe even we've been there, but you're like, well, I don't need to go there again, but I'd like to take the money that I would have, you know, spent on a vacation or spent traveling there to install that stove and give it to that school or other nonprofit, like independently. So I know a lot of people, like even not in retirement, who have even started to do that and convert that money into like places and things that they're really passionate about, and like kind of relive those memories of travel through like bigger ways of giving back. So I just always encourage people to get creative with their travel.
Yeah, for sure. There's so many different ways to travel.
Yes.
I got to make a shout out to one of the nonprofits that I personally support. And would love to go on one of their trips sometime, is H2O for Life. It's all about giving people access to clean drinking water. And I just love what they're doing, and I love that it's a lot about the same thing. They're not just, you know, here's some money and, you know, some bottles of water kind of thing. It's like, we're going to help you install this so that you have clean access to water. You don't have to walk, you know, 5 miles each way to get water. I think that's a really cool thing too. But like, again, when it comes to being creative with travel, you can find things like that, different nonprofits that, you support their cause and you want to be a part of that community that we talked about. And so it's cool when you find something that aligns with you and, might have opportunities for you, or like you said, your money to go travel and make an impact on the world. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
What else? What other work travel experiences?
Oh my gosh. One time I was in Peru during flood season and we had to travel between these two locations, the main location and then the jungle home. So I worked with a school that they basically rescued teenage boys from human trafficking. And so there's actually a really big human trafficking ring in northern Peru specifically for little boys for homosexual human trafficking, or whatever the appropriate term is for that. But they and so these boys have gone through a lot of trauma. A lot of them are generally coming from homes where it's really difficult because the mother has generally been left by someone who's abused them or kicked them out. They find another spouse. The spouse doesn't want to take on their kids from the previous relationship. So the mom, as soon as the kids turn 13 kind of thing, or as soon as they can fend for themselves, so sometimes 11, 12, they basically will take them to the market and then just disappear. And so these kids will wander around the market for a really long time until they get hungry and they can't find mom anymore, kind of thing.
Yeah. And
so essentially, as soon as mom feels like she can do that and the kids can fend for themselves, they will do that to protect themselves and the younger kids a lot of times. Yeah. And so these kids will start to steal to feed themselves because they're hungry at this point. They get caught by the police, and then the police torture them because that's legal to do for just stealing bread or whatever it is. And then generally they're watched by people in human trafficking rings to then kind of bring them, kind of coax them in essentially, where they're saying hey, I watched you got abused, this has happened several times, I can offer you a safe space. That's then when they get looped in. So then at that point they have to go through a rescue and rehabilitation process because they're usually very traumatized from that experience, but also again tortured during that process. Yeah. So they're brought out to this jungle home essentially, where it's on this little island by themselves, and they will go through essentially a rehab program out there to the best of the ability that this program can offer. And just for safety's sake, I'm not going to name the organization this time, but these boys are again in the middle of nowhere, and so we were coming in from kind of this mainland space, and everything is flood season, and so a lot of the houses are on stilts to accommodate for flood season, and so the floods will come all the way up to their door essentially, and you can see where sort of the flood has come in rows and stuff like that. And we walked into this school that has steps that are way up high to again accommodate for the flooding, and you've got this dock that's at this weird angle and stuff, and everybody gets in these little teeny tiny boats, and you're basically floating through garbage in this once was a street, and you're paddling around the tops of basketball hoops. And you're that's where the basketball court is, not during flood season. So just we have spring and, fall and winter and all that, this is their winter season. And so they're not playing basketball during the season, obviously. And we went out between these houses, and, you see kids, animals and kids in the water and stuff like that with the trash, and people trying to pull drinking water out of the, trash-filled water as well. And obviously that's a problem in its own, but we get out to this little jungle, and you of course are avoiding all sorts of other jungle creatures in the water and through the trees and all of that. And that was a really tender experience, again, to just go out there and just see like what they're living with and like how little there really is and like what we consider our rehab program versus like what they consider a rehab program. Rehab is like basically you're safe. Like here's a place to like process all your emotions like an adult even though you're 12.
Jeez.
And so like that's so sad and so like interesting to see these programs that like they work, they are seeing like rehab, they are seeing, you know, missionaries or nonprofit service members come in and out. But generally you just have like a house parent essentially that's just like responsible for all these kids that are like acting out who like don't even know how to process anything. And this person has not been like trained as a therapist or anything. They may have their own problems, but they are the only person who's willing to be there, you know, and the poverty is just so palatable that you're like, can't be real.
Yeah.
But like they're so happy, you know?
Yeah.
And they're just thankful that they're not in the situation that they were in before. And so yeah, that was really moving to like, you know, open doors and like see where they're at in like their bunk beds and like fly nets everywhere just like to keep out the bugs and you know, like the way that they wash their dishes and you know, like how do we try to keep ourselves from having to go into town and go to the doctor and we're teaching kids to like raise their own chickens and you've got these kids like walking around with giant machetes at like 8 years old, you know, because they're like, I take care of myself. Like I got left on the streets. Like I just do everything. And to just see like the way that they cope, they love, they sing, they dance, they appreciate is just like, again, a really powerful thing to be involved in. And so, we worked a lot on like fundraising and marketing for that organization as well, between the US and Peru. And then they had a school. And so we partnered with the school as well. Once the kids aged out of the jungle program, they would then come in and we could house a few of them on the mainland, basically. And mainland, you know, obviously it's all mainland, but the like main city area, and they could go in and start to apply for like high school or college, essentially, based on their sponsorship levels. And so that was pretty cool to see kids like get it together, but then also like go to college and get married and all of that too. And you know, they probably would have been dead otherwise. So.
Yeah, wow, that's so cool to hear. It got me thinking about, I was kind of getting emotional while you were talking about that, because in Guatemala, during my experience there, I mean, we went to a remote part of Guatemala and taught English and brought them supplies and stuff, and it was amazing to see how little they had and how happy they were. I've never met any people that were happier than those people. And it was just, that forever changed my life. Was getting to see like, you barely make it through each day and you're the happiest person I've ever met on this planet. Kind of puts things into perspective in your own life. There's so many things that happen around the world that we just have no idea about either. Kind of a side note here, and not a good side note, but human trafficking is one of the biggest problems in the world right now. It's like on a massive rise right now. But you never hear about it, really. I've actually started seeing some commercials recently on TV about it. But I was recently at the Center for Civil and Human Rights in Atlanta, and they talked about the human trafficking, and it's getting exponentially worse right now, unfortunately. And so, you know, I think it's amazing that there's an organization that is helping people through that. It's not a good thing that's happening with that right now.
Well, I don't think people realize like the repercussions of just like what somebody goes through. I know actually Spokane has a really large human trafficking circle, and actually a friend of mine was rescued from human trafficking. And like she now is a not only wonderful human being who has gone through recovery, but like is married with kids and runs a successful business in Spokane. And like that is so beautiful to see her give back a portion of her proceeds to that rehabilitation process and to like bring education to the area. And yeah, I've seen more, posters and things up lately too, but it's definitely not something that's taught and talked about. That was not something I learned about in high school.
Yeah.
How crazy is that there's people that graduate from high school without knowing about human trafficking. They don't know about gaslighting. They don't know about abusive relationships. They don't know about some of the biggest things that will impact their journey through young adulthood. And human trafficking is one of those things that if you don't know what you're looking for, in an instant your life can change.
Yeah.
And I think we really are failing our young people in a lot of ways, and it's definitely getting worse.
Yeah, well, and again, that's where I think traveling can really be beneficial for people. Is you open your eyes to the world,
and learn a sense of awareness too.
Yeah,
what am I looking for? Oh, that person feels scary. I should, people have vibes. Learn how to read those and use your sixth sense.
I think, I love that being in a totally different place from what you know. You become a lot more aware of your surroundings, and you're a lot more in tune with the moment. You're not thinking about whatever. Your brain isn't on autopilot. You're going, okay, there's potential danger around. I got to pay attention.
Yeah.
And I think that's a skill that you develop by traveling.
Totally. Our brains get comfortable, and they like comfortability. In relationships, in jobs, in locations. Shake it up. And that doesn't mean you have to move away from your family. My sister always told me, she's the best thing I ever did for myself was move away from my family. And not because she hated her family, but because it shook things up for her. And I was actually in a really abusive relationship at one point in time, and I didn't know how to get out of it. And I think I had to teach myself how to change the way that I thought, because I was so comfortable with the uncomfortability that I was in that it was easier to deal with the situation that I was in and then to change it, because that was the unknown was really painful. And so to think about that and what travel has even taught me about myself, I have sort of made a life theme about pressing into the uncomfortable now, because as soon as you do it, it becomes comfortable, and you can reframe things, and you can even go back to uncomfortable spaces and change the environment there, and what your memories are, and your brain does crazy things to protect itself in uncomfortable spaces or in new spaces. And so it's if you want to grow as a person, if you want new things to be firing in your brain, travel.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of my life philosophies is, if you force yourself to be uncomfortable, then everything else becomes comfortable around you. If you push yourself through, painful exercises or, whatever it is, then when you're forced into those sort of situations, it becomes easy. So I think, just getting out there, just take the risk, like you said. Obviously be smart, but if you take the risk, there's a lot of reward in it, for sure.
Well, I think just to make it relatable for people who maybe haven't traveled as much, it's the same as going to the gym, or creating new eating habits or New Year's resolutions in your job. I think those, find something that you can relate it to in your life that you're already comfortable with, creating micro habits, and then build new habits and expectations and themes around those things. And you can take a skill that you already know essentially and move it into a new space, because you're already comfortable with it. All you have to do is reframe it to that new space.
Definitely. And life gets easier when you start pushing your boundaries. The things that might have seemed hard are now easy. It always gets me with running, because I've become an avid runner now, and you're an avid runner too. 2 years ago, I thought running 3 miles was ridiculous. That was way too far, and now 3 miles is that's a nice warm up kind of thing. And so
I know, I'm did I actually run today?
Yeah,
I ran 3 miles.
It's with travel, and really, anything in life, you don't know what your potential is until you start pushing those boundaries, start pushing into that uncomfortability, like you said.
We're amazing as humans, and then as soon as you start traveling, you'll find out that humans are pretty fantastic.
Yeah.
And so, just I think stretching that even idea of what can I become, or what do other people view the world as, allows you to be I could do that too.
Yeah, and you realize we're all just trying to be happy, get through life, enjoy it as much as we can, It's not everything that you hear on the media,
No.
on the news and stuff like that. That is a small portion of life.
Very small, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess any other stories you want to share?
I mean, I could go on about this forever. You'll end up with like a 10-hour podcast.
Yeah. I mean, I got all the time in the world here.
Trying to think. There's some other good ones.
Should probably end on a happy one.
Not a happy one where I'm not like dying or something. I'm trying to think. Yeah, more stories.
Most exciting trip
yeah.
you've been on? Most exciting moment of a trip?
Okay. So, yeah, I said all the trips were my favorite, you know?
Yeah.
But they definitely ended in, like, dying or something. Yeah, I think my favorite trip... Okay, I'll tell you about my favorite trip that has a happy note, and then I'll tell you about my favorite trip that I think is coming up this August.
Okay.
Okay? So, my friend Emily and I, we met on a dating app.
Okay.
She's my dating app friend. We were both on dating apps, different dating apps at the same time. And I love just the story on its own. But we were both talking to the same guy that said he wasn't interested in either of us, but we needed to be friends. So he set us up on a blind date, and we're like texting each other, and we're like, are you there? Like, what color car? You know, are you driving? And like, my friend goes through the whole thing, and she's just like, I really felt like I was going on a date. Like, it was actually weird. So we meet up at this trailhead and go on a run. I actually showed her my phone the other day, and I'm like, I still have your contact as like Emily, ultra marathon racer. And at that time, she was just prepping for her first ultra, but she was far ahead of where I was at. We bonded and have become really good friends since then. She actually just ran her first 100-mile race, the I'm Tough out of McCall, and did really well. She was one of the top women's backcountry snowmobilers in the country for a long time. Has taught a ton of snowmobile clinics and stuff, has some really cool records for desert motorbike racing too. And so she has taught me so much about the outdoors. And one weekend, her and I met up at like 10 o'clock at night and drove to Montana. And we like pulled up to this trailhead. It's obviously like after midnight and super dark. And we just like basically park the car wherever we think we can and roll into the back seat and like have our sleeping bags already laid out. And we spend the night there, get up at like 3 o'clock in the morning, and we eat our overnight oatmeal that we had already prepared. We were getting ready for this trail run. We go back to sleep, and we're like, okay, this is going to digest for a little bit. We'll get up in like an hour. And we're like testing out all these fueling systems, basically, for long distance running. And we get out of the car at like 4 o'clock in the morning now, or 4:30 or whatever. Still dark. We like start this run. It was basically just straight up this mountain. Is really what it was. So we run up this mountain for 10 miles and we get to the top. And these people are like just waking up and making coffee and we're like, good morning! And we like look insane. And they're like, what are you doing? Like, you know, it's at this time like still fairly early on a Saturday morning. And they're like all rolling out of their sleeping bags and like starting to brew coffee and they're like trying to get their glasses on kind of thing. And people are like hobbling around and we just like run through these camps. And they're just like, we have no idea what just like happened. So we go in and we like hit this alpine link and we're like refilling our water and like filtering stuff and like having snacks and jumping around and like being insane by this point of the time of the day. And so then we like run through these camps again on our way down, run another 10 miles downhill and like pass all these people who are just like starting to hike. And so it was incredibly gorgeous. We had such a good time. But this was we did this like 20-mile run. And it was just like, I'll never forget those people's faces where we were just like blasting past people in their PJs. And super incredible, beautiful place. But yeah, that was one of those like epic runs where like it wasn't like somewhere that most people would even know. We like drove kind of in the middle of nowhere. But if I'm like really going to rest now, like I go back to that place where I'm like, the canyons were just gorgeous. The mountains were gorgeous. Like I've taken some friends back there a few times. There was like a lot of diversity to the trail. And yeah, it was just like one of those things where like, I just want to get away from everything. And you're like, I'm just going to drive to Montana and go to like nowhere. And then like, again, we weren't expecting these people, but I'll always just like laugh about that one.
That's funny. I probably would think the same thing if I was in their shoes. Be like, what are you doing right now?
And of course, like they had hauled like, you know, tons of weight up there with their packs and had, you know, spent all day hiking this 10-mile trail kind of thing. And so I think like to see two women just like blast through with all this energy still, you know, is even more just, you know, silly to them.
Yeah. That's when you know, that's the thing is like, no matter how good you are, there's always someone better than you.
Yeah.
That's what I think about. Like, man, I spent half a day hiking up this hill, and they just passed me in an hour.
Yeah. For sure. I think she did. I'll interject this other story. We did another trail out of the Leavenworth area, and we put together this 50K loop. Or actually, not loop. It was an out and back. So we did car to car, or not. That's not even out and back. I can't even talk. We did one car to the other car, and then we ended up having to like hitch a ride and walk down this road back to our cars. But anyway, it was really cool because that was also one where we like ran up this mountain. We're like picking huckleberries and like having this really like picturesque, beautiful like autumn, you know, just jaunt through the mountains in Leavenworth. Basically, everything is like turning red, and you can see these like glaciers that like, you know, are still like melting from summer, basically.
Such
weather
a
is
beautiful area in the fall.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. So then we like are picking huckleberries and blueberries and stuff, and then this like bear comes up next to us, and we're just like been eating huckleberries and blueberries with a bear. And we were like, okay, we should keep running, and you know, we just like keep like dancing along, basically. Very
How
like.
close was the bear?
What?
How close was the bear?
I don't know. He was like over there eating. Like, I mean, close enough that we're like, we should keep moving, but like not close enough that he's like in our face yet, kind of thing. But you know, like. Something, I don't know, 100 feet away or whatever. I don't know. Like far enough that we're
closer
like,
than probably you want a bear.
Yeah, closer than we wanted him to be, far enough away that we were like, he's not going to like charge us this second kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so then we ended up like running through, we ran up this glacier, which was really cool. And then we like took our shoes, or we like took our little cleats off the bottom of our shoes, and we like slid down as like we were skiing down the other side of it, which was really fun. And then we also had kind of one of those moments on the other end of it coming out where we like ran through a bunch of people's camps. That was my first 50K run, and that was really cool because it was like everything you could have ever wanted on a run. Just like perfect colors with like everything was red, the larches were yellow. There was like the berries weren't dried. We got to see tons of wildlife, still hit a glacier, got to ski, you know, everything you could have wanted. That was really fun. So
yeah, sounds like a fun time.
Yeah. So we are planning to run the Tetons in August.
Okay.
So there is some like records that we want to just see what we can do in that area and do there's like a classic kind of route where you come in and you run in and then you climb the Tetons in a trad climb, and then you rappel down, and it's like this overhanging rappel that's just like totally free over a couple pitches, so you're just like dangling there like a pendulum. And then you run out, and then we're going to probably either the next day or the day after we'll circumnavigate it too. So we're going to break up the infinity loop with into 2 days so that we can see everything we want to see. But I think that'll be really fun too.
Yeah, sounds like fun, except for the dangling over nothing.
You'll have to ask me about how that one goes.
Yeah.
I'll let you know if I die or not.
We'll just have a whole nother episode with just near-death experiences.
Just that one? I know, right? I'll compile them for you.
Yeah. Oh, goodness. Well, Amanda, anything else that you want to share with the listeners?
Oh, like I said, I could go on and on. So I just appreciate you having me here. I hope that it inspired people to get outside and just like find the laughs, like I think, some of those things could be sort of boring to some people, but I think like they're precious to me for the looks on people's faces that I'll never forget, or, just like the silly jokes we cracked along the way, and the like action shots that we tried to take with our camera that didn't work, and, travel is, again, what you make of it. And travel can be in your backyard, and travel is really about the community and your mindset. And so I would just encourage people to kind of compile their own sets of travel, like no matter what their means are, because it's way more accessible than you think it is.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I think, find what makes you happy too.
Yeah.
I mean, the adventure travel might be fun for some people, but maybe not for others.
Right.
And so there's lots of different types of travel. Find what suits you.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of great things that you can experience out there in one way or another.
Sounds like you won't be joining me on any of those pendulum swings anytime soon.
I'll join you on the runs.
Okay.
I'm not going to dangle over a cliff with you.
Okay, I'll keep that in mind.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Amanda, thanks again for taking the time, and I hope that we can do this podcast again soon.
That'd be fun. Thanks for having me.
All right. Bye, everyone. Hey everybody, Kyle here. If you enjoyed today's show and want more, you can always listen to other episodes on Spotify or Anchor. The links are in the description below. If you want to see travel pictures from today's guest and other guests, as well as my own travel photos, you can see them on Instagram. The page is called Our Travel Experiences Podcast. If you want to share your own travel pictures on the page and or share your travel experiences on the podcast, you can message me on that Instagram page or email me at ourtravelexperiences@outlook.com. I would love to hear about your travel experiences and see all the beautiful pictures that you've taken. Thanks again for listening, everyone, and I look forward to sharing the world with you again soon.